Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming out in the heat and staying in the heat. I'm going to introduce the two lieutenant governor candidates first. First we'll be joined by Jumaane Williams, who was born in New York City. He graduated from Brooklyn College with a BA and MA degrees. He has been the New York City Council member for the 45th District since 2009 and currently serves on the Council Deputy Leader as a Council Deputy Leader and Chair of the City Workforce Equity Task Force. Please join me in welcoming Jumaane. Thank you. The incumbent Lieutenant Governor is Kathy Hochul. Hochul was born in Buffalo. She graduated from Syracuse University and the Columbus School of Law at Catholic University. She worked for a Washington, D.C. law firm as a legal counsel and legislative aide to Representative LaFalce, I'm going to pronounce that, Senator Patrick Moynihan, and the New York State Assembly. Hochul was appointed Erie County Clerk Deputy and in 2007 became the Erie County Clerk. She won a special election to fill a vacancy in New York's 26th Congressional District and became Lieutenant Governor in 2015. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Hochul. Hi, Kathy. Now we can all sit. And before we get started, I just wanted to say a few words, and that is the importance of the upcoming elections, and I guess that's why we're all here sitting in the 90-degree heat. And I just want to remind everyone as we start this conversation that the differences between us and our party are a speck compared to the ocean that separates us from what's happening in our country. And the importance of this election, this isn't Democrat versus Republican in this election only. This is a battle for our democracy as we know it. So you're here because you're engaged, but we all need to get everybody we know to the polls and pull out your iPhones or your Androids and put in September 13th and then put in November 9th, and we all have to get, November 6th, I'm sorry, November 6th and September 13th. Don't go on November 9th. We all need to get to the polls. So without further ado, we did an official coin toss, and Kathy is going to go first and give a 2 to 3 minute statement, and then Jumaane will do the same. We have questions that we've gotten from the audience in advance, as well as questions that the indivisible groups and the hosts have put together. So with each question, they're going to have 2 minutes each to answer, and we're going to alternate going first. First, we're going to have the questions prepared by the hosts, and then questions that were submitted from the audience. And then we'll do closing statements. So please, opening statement.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Is my microphone on?
No.
Okay. Technical difficulties.
Try this for now.
You know, and I thought the pockets were going to be more useful than that. Amy, thank you first of all. Indivisible Westchester, you guys rock. I think this is incredible. NYD 16, Indivisible New Rochelle. I am so excited to see the activism and the energy that's in this room. And I'll tell you right now, I've said this for a long time. Complacency died in November of 2016, and that is evidenced here with this incredible crowd. So thank you all for turning out. I want to thank my challenger, Councilman Jumaane Williams, for participating this evening. I'm looking forward to many more conversations as this election season heats up, as we can feel the heat today. And Amy, thank you for your contributions to our democracy by calling out the illegitimate person who calls himself our president every single week. I love seeing what you do, and you are making incredible contributions. A couple minutes about me, and then we'll get into some good conversation, which I'm really looking forward to. 4 years ago, Governor Cuomo asked me to be his partner in government, and that is the operative word here. I define my role as a partner in running a very complicated state. We made some promises to you. We promised that we would raise the minimum wage, and we delivered. We promised that we'd have the most generous paid family leave program in America, and we delivered. We promised that we'd work hard to eradicate sexual assault on college campuses, an issue that brought me all across the state, but to Westchester many times. We delivered on that. And we promised free tuition for families with earning less than $125,000. We delivered on that. But those, in one sense, were not the challenges we anticipate, because the world changed, New York State changed with the election of Donald Trump. And that is why I am a tested fighter, and I have worked with our governor to rebuff him at every single turn, using my experience as a member of Congress. I was deployed to go there many times to try and fight to stop the extra taxation on New Yorkers through the SALT bill, fight to save the Affordable Care Act once again. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I have the scars to show, because as a Democrat, in the most Republican district in the state of New York, I refuse to turn my back on my president and vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and as a result, I became a former member of Congress. But that led me to this magnificent opportunity to be your voice and to use my lifetime of fighting for people who need someone with a strong voice to be there for all of them. So I would humbly ask you to consider once again sending me off with Governor Andrew Cuomo to make sure that we thwart Donald Trump every step of the way, because we are better united. And I'm going to keep working to elect Democrats in the House and the Senate, and make sure that Andrea Stewart-Cousins and someone I fought for, Shelley Mayer, are part of our majority when we swear them in January. Thank you very much.
Yep, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
You're
all right.
the only one working.
Thank you so much, Indivisible Westchester. First of all, this is a dope turnout. There's so many people here, and I hope there's more people watching. This absolutely shows that everybody's engaged, and I'm just very proud to be here, and I'm proud to have gotten the endorsement of Sister Chapter Indivisible Brooklyn. And thank you, Amy, for the work that you've done, and Kathy for being here, and all the dignitaries who are here. My name is Jumaane Williams. I'm a council member from Brooklyn, New York. I am a community organizer by training. This is before anyone knew what a community organizer was. This is before Barack Obama. Now I'm proud that everybody knows what it is. I ran against an incumbent about 9-10 years ago. I was told I shouldn't do it. There were 6 people in the race, including the incumbent. I decided to do it anyway because I felt I had a different vision of what an elected official could be. And I wanted to be an activist elected official. And so we ran, everything lined up, I got elected, and I've been trying to cause as much trouble as humanly possible in the city council in New York City since I got elected. My dream was to show that you can be a productive activist elected official. However, at that time, and for many years, most of the complaints that I got was that you're too much of an activist, too much activism. You have to choose between activism and being an elected official. At that time, I always said, no, you don't. We have gotten whatever rights we have by activism. We're going to protect the rights that we have by activism, and we'll get further rights by activism. So I chose not to. And I was very proud when City and State magazine listed me as the most productive council member after the speaker in the 51-member body. We just passed our 49th piece of legislation. And as luck may have it, in 2018, every elected official is trying to show how much of the activists they are, even though I haven't seen many in the streets. But it's important to say why I'm running for lieutenant governor. I'm running for lieutenant governor because, with respect, there's just 2 different visions of what that office can be. And that's because what the office has been relegated to very much by the governor and others who've been there. And so there's one school of thought that it is simply just to repeat and do what the governor says to do. I reject that, particularly in 2018. And I know there's a general election coming, but I firmly believe that any blue just won't do. And we want to make sure that our voices are being heard. So I'm running not to be any governor's lieutenant governor. I'm running to be the people's lieutenant governor, to raise a voice, to point out issues that are not being pointed out otherwise. And in city, we have a position called the public advocate. All they do is raise their voice of the public. I think Albany is missing that. I think Albany needs someone who's not connected to the legislature, who's not necessarily connected to the governor, but is only lifting the voice of the people. And that's exactly what I want to do. I want to work with the governor, whether he or she is there when we're being productive. But when we're not, and when we're doing something like saying there's an Excelsior program, but only 2% of CUNY students are eligible for it, someone has to point that out, and I'd love to be your next lieutenant governor. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Two great candidates, thank you both. So just logistically, you won't be able to see it from where you're sitting, but my girl Tasha has cards she's holding up. So we're gonna limit questions to 2 minutes per candidate, and they're gonna be able to see how much time they have left to answer a whole lot of questions we're gonna try to get to. We'll get to as many as we can. And Jumaane, I'm gonna start with you, and the first topic is the role of Lieutenant Governor. How do you view the role of Lieutenant Governor? Do you pledge to advance a progressive agenda? And what would be your priorities for this upcoming term?
Thank you so much. If I knew that was a question, I would have changed my last couple minutes and said something else. But I very much believe that the position of the Lieutenant Governor is something that I want to change fundamentally. As I mentioned, I believe that you should work with the governor, he or she, to progress and advance things that are helpful to the people of the state of New York. But when it's not, when there are things being put out, when the lip service doesn't match the action, whether you're saying there is a paid family leave, but people can opt out, and the UFT in the city have to fight for it, and SUNY people actually don't have it. Someone has to say that, either in private to try to make it change, or in public when it doesn't change. And I think Albany has really been bereft of someone who's able to do that. And so, generally speaking, there's two folks, and I have said that I particularly don't support this governor, and I think other people who don't understand what I'm saying. But I understand also that there are people who do support the governor. But they also understand the need to have balance, not to be obstructionist, but to have balance and hold people accountable. What I'd like to do, and I'd like people to go to my website, because we published a white paper, which pointed out something very fundamental, which is we have $20 billion. Everybody say $20 billion. $20 billion that we don't collect. And the reason for that, I believe, is one, there's an artificial spending tax cap, not to be confused with the property tax cap that I support. A spending tax cap which says if we have a $10 budget, we can't go to 12 for no other reason except we just want to look like we can do budgeting. But there are $14 billion just by Wall Street taxes that we used to collect that we just returned to them. And we have a whole host of those things under the $20 billion plan that if we collect, we can pay for deeply income-targeted affordable housing, we can pay for energy infrastructure, we can pay for better schools, we can pay for transportation. But it takes someone who's outside of those two realms, whether it's just the governor or the legislature, to be able to push an agenda like that. I have 9 years of being productive in pushing issues that people didn't want to push, that we made popular and made people have to respond to. And so now people are responding to the political winds. And I'm hoping that we can put people in office that help create the political wins.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor.
I appreciate the question to allow us to draw a distinction between our visions for the role. I will tell you that 4 years ago when the governor asked me to be his running mate and his partner, and the voters overwhelmingly elected the two of us, they expect us to govern collaboratively and work together. Because the last thing I want to see in my state is a return to the gridlock and the infighting that dominated Washington, D.C. when I was there, because my job with Governor Cuomo is simple, to get stuff done. Okay? It's not about taking shots at someone. When you think about it, how would it have been for Barack Obama to live every day not knowing if Joe Biden was out there criticizing his policies or taking shots at him in the media or finding ways to be adversarial? I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, there are plenty of people to hold someone accountable. The voters, number one. The media, number two. The elected officials in the legislature, the Senate Republicans. We need a united vision in our executive branch. And it's a different branch than serving as a legislator. I get that. But if someone wants to be the executive, you run for governor. You want to run and work with the governor and be there to fight for programs that make sense, like working for minimum wage and making sure that no one in our state who works 40 hours a week lives below the poverty line. We fix that. Issues like criminal justice reform, raising the age, we accomplished that. Making sure that we treat women with dignity in the workplace and having policies to ensure that the Me Too movement is alive and well in our state, and we'll call out anyone in the workplace who denigrates women, because as the only woman in state office, I know what I'm talking about. Okay. So these are issues where I think people need to understand We can get more done for the people of our state working together, not fighting each other. I saw it in Washington. I do not want to see it in our state capitol.
Thank you. Okay, don't get too comfortable, Lieutenant Governor, because you're up first. The next topic is taxes. Westchester has some of the highest property taxes in the country. Don't we all know it? It is too expensive for too many first-time home buyers and for many retirees to stay in their homes. How do you propose addressing the high cost of living in Westchester, especially in light of the recent changes to SALT deductions on federal income tax?
Well, we saw this one coming with the election of Donald Trump. Who would have thought that he would absolutely do everything in his power to hurt his home state of New York? And that's exactly what the SALT changes. They called it tax reform, but who's taking it on the chin? New York State taxpayers send $48 billion more to Washington than we receive in benefits. And on top of that, starting next spring when you're filing your taxes, ladies and gentlemen, get ready to be shocked because you're basically going to have a 20 to 30% tax increase once you can no longer deduct state local taxes. I went down to Washington. I sat there with the Republican members of our legislature and said, you cannot do this to New York State. This is your home state, for God's sakes. Well, the Republicans drank the Kool-Aid of Donald Trump, and they turned their backs and literally knifed people like us, especially in places like Westchester. Westchester is also a place where the tax cap that the governor fought hard for and put in place to keep your taxes under control, because we work very hard to try to recruit businesses to come to our state, but come to places like Westchester, because I want to see everyone have the dignity of a good job, and those policies are working. And I will also say, thank God, we no longer have the reign of Rob Astorino to deal with, and we have someone who I worked hard to elect as our great county executive, George Latimer. A loss to our Senate, but a gain to the people of Westchester. So we are working together, the governor, myself, and George Latimer, and your female-dominated county legislature. I want to thank you for that as well. I love coming to Westchester. I don't know if you knew this, but they declared it Kathy Hochul Day in Westchester a couple months ago, and I had drinks on the house for everyone. I love coming here. But it is a big concern of ours. Your schools are first rate. The taxes are too high. The property tax is going to work, and we're going to continue fighting the Republicans in Washington and turn back that elimination of the deductibility of state and local taxes. We have no choice. The people of Westchester need that.
Thank you. Jumaane.
I thank you for this question. I did want to make a clarifying statement that the president and the vice president, they run as a ticket. In the wisdom of New York State, the governor and lieutenant governor do not. And I believe that was for a particular reason, to allow a vision like this to come to fruition. And I think it's even important in this question because one of the reasons locality struggles is because of what's happening at the executive and the legislature. So when there's an artificial spending tax cap, even if you can collect the money and you say you don't want to for whatever reason, or if you've helped empower a Republican Senate so that you can't get the progressive taxation that you want, what you have to do, particularly if you're planning to run for president, is to show that you can balance budgets. And so they do artificial ways to balance the budget, but what that has the effect of is pushing the needs that are necessary for a county or a municipality to have to make tough choices. And that's unfair because all they have to do is either raise taxes or cut. Now, if we can have someone to put forth a vision where we can actually collect $20 billion where there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't, that is one of the main changes that we can make, and that's why I opened up with it, because that money is just hanging out there. And there's no reason we can't collect. As a matter of fact, the $14 billion we used to collect, and we just started. And most people don't know about that. And I think it's very important because if they did, we'd realize when folks say we don't have the money to spend, it usually means we don't have the money to spend what you care about. And we need to change that conversation. I did want to make mention, in case folks don't know, I have Tourette's syndrome, so you may see me shake a little bit, but everything is cool as a fan up here. I do get off a lot of water. It's not hiccups, but it does make me sweat a little bit, so you may see me dab my forehead, but everything's okay. Thank you so much.
You. Would you rather take off your jacket? Okay. This is one of those rare times being a woman in a sleeveless dress comes in handy. So you're up first on the next question, and the topic is education, Jumaane. And the question is, what are your plans for ensuring high-need schools get the funds they need for every school to do well, regardless of zip code?
Well, first, I'm a New York State public school baby. From preschool to master's, educated in the public school system, and I'm very proud of it. I understand the needs. I understand that it's a jewel that needs to be published. The first thing that needs to be done is the governor has to live up to the campaign for fiscal equity. It is critically important that all of the schools get the money that they deserve and that legally should be getting it. Very often they say they spend more money than any place in the country. That's usually not a good barometer because cost of living is highest here, so that's not the best barometer. The barometer is what the law said that should happen. And they have increased the spending, but they never say they actually cut the spending before and restored it. And so we have a long way to go before we get campaign for fiscal equity and make sure the schools have the money they not only deserve, but were ordered to spend, and that's critically important. And also we do know that money doesn't solve everything, but it's tremendously important. Charter schools, I'm not as of right, opposition of charter schools, but I do oppose them trying to be used to replace the public school system, and I am opposed to forced co-locations. I'm very proud to have beaten two, one of them Success Academy in my district. We have to put the money and focus on the true public school system. We can't throw gold dust up in the air, or so-called gold dust, and see who can grab it. And so this is a fundamental question of our time, not just money, but where are we focusing our energy to make sure that everybody, regardless of zip code, has access to the quality education we need. And it's critically important because very often people equate public safety with law enforcement, and that's not correct. Law enforcement is one of the pillars of public safety. But if we take care of deeply income-targeted housing, if we take care of making sure that educational system is what it should be, if we make sure everyone's employed, public safety then begins to have a different connotation, and it makes education critically important. Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor.
I believe that the most important dollars that we can spend as a government are in the education of our children. And that is why every year that I've been your Lieutenant Governor, the budget for education spending in our state has gone up $1 billion per year. We are now at $27 billion. But I do agree with the councilman. It's not just about the dollars, it's where they're being spent. And in our own state of New York, we have some districts where $33,000 a year is being spent to educate a child, and in other districts, it's $11,000. That disparity is too great, and that is why we are turning the system upside down. We are going to continue elevating our teachers and treating them with the respect they deserve, but also saying this formula is not working for us because we have to make sure, just because the Republicans on Long Island control much of the spending, we're going to go after them this January when we take over. And I'll tell you, when the Democrats take over the Senate, the first 100 days are going to be unprecedented in the progress we're going to be able to make when the Republicans are no longer controlling that House. And a lot of it comes down to their insistence that the money be spent in areas where it's just not as needed. They need to come to communities in Mount Vernon and Yonkers and see there are kids who need our help. I've been in those streets. I've been in those programs. I've seen the early childhood programs. They work, but we have to continue investing in our pre-K programs. Unprecedented amounts of money have been spent in those programs. We need to reward those schools and those community programs. We've invested money in high-targeted, high-need areas all over the state. So it's not just one-size approach fits all anymore. That has not worked. But we're going to continue investing kindergarten, pre-K programs through high school, but also giving young people the shot at the American dream that my parents, who started life living in a trailer park, were able to elevate themselves, and my dad could go to a college and was the first of his generation to do so. We're making sure there is free tuition for students in our state, and people at the lowest end of the socioeconomic scale, they get some help, but that's that middle income, $50,000 to $125,000, where they had no opportunity, and that exists now thanks to the governor and my program. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. So we are going to take one final question from the hosts, and that is on health care. And Lieutenant Governor, you're going to be first. Do you support single-payer health care? If you support it, how do you plan to pay for it? If you do not support it, how do you propose to make sure all New Yorkers have adequate access to affordable health care?
Well, this is something I know a great deal about. As I mentioned, I won in my seat fighting for Medicare against the Tea Party members of Congress who were trying to strip it. So that's how I was elected. So I went to Washington feeling empowered, that I had a responsibility to fight for health care for all and keep the promises through Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security that were made back in the 1960s. So when it came time to fight for the Affordable Care Act, I was on the front line. And I will get to the premise of the question in 1 second, but you need to know that I have been a champion fighting for women's reproductive health. And when Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, had a provision that provided for contraception coverage, that is the issue that I was attacked at by my own church when people in a gathering like this came out and protested me, and I ultimately lost my seat because I would not turn my back on the women of my state. So in the state of New York, regardless of what happens in Washington, I can tell you as sure as I'm standing here, Governor Cuomo and I are going to continue to make sure all women's reproductive health is covered. We're going to make sure that the Republicans are wiped out in January, that we will finally codify Roe v. Wade once and for all. Let's get it done. The governor and I are here just 2 weeks ago with members of this community fighting for that. But when it comes to single payer, I support it. But I also want to make sure that people know, regardless of whether that becomes a law of the land or not, New York State will continue to have the highest standard levels of care, ensure more people are insured. We have gone from 18% of people without insurance to 5%. 5% is still too high, but it is a huge priority of ours to make sure that no parent ever has to deny getting child care. Their child health assistance is something I saw in the rural parts of my district. High pockets of poverty where people were letting their health decline because they just couldn't afford a doctor. This is the great state of New York, ladies and gentlemen. We're not letting that happen here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is something that's very important to me as well, having a pre-existing condition like Tourette syndrome, like ADHD. My father, rest in peace, was a physician. My sister's a nurse. My mother's a pharmacist. So healthcare has been something that's very crucial to me. Obviously, single-payer healthcare is what we should be doing. Everybody knows that. The only reason we don't have it is because there are big companies making money, and those big companies donate to Republicans and Democrats alike, and that's the only reason we don't have it here. I'm very proud to support not only women's right to choose, but reproductive justice as a whole, not just the one issue, because reproductive justice is a complete and full thing that must be spoken about. What happens to a woman if they choose an abortion? If they don't, where are they going to live? Where are they going to be schooled? That is an entire conversation. I'm very proud to have voted against the crisis pregnancy centers in the city council. I'm very proud that I have a bill now called the Boss Bill that we're going to get passed that does not allow, I was shocked to find out that employers can fire employees based on their reproductive decisions. We have that bill we're going to get passed in the city council. What is critical to me why I'm running in the primary is I don't believe that all the things that we have are because of the Republicans. And we have to unite, but we'll do that after the primary. I believe that there were Democrats who didn't have the courage to do the things that needed to be done. New York State should have already codified Roe v. Wade. New York State should already have single-payer healthcare. The reason we didn't is because we empowered people like the IDC, we empowered people like the Republican Party, and it wasn't as crucial before as it is now. And so we don't want people who test the winds to see when things are crucial. We want people who say this is the right thing to do and get it done now. And as Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to make it my duty to understand the parliamentary procedures of the state Senate and keep that close to my heart so when the time arises, I'm well-versed on how to muck that up until we get Roe v. Wade codified, until we get single-payer health care, until we get a gender that also respects the transgender women and men of color who will have some issues with it. Those things we have to do. It should have been done a long time ago. We now need Democrats who have been activist elected officials to get into places that they can move these things along. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're going to switch over to audience questions, and the first is on voter laws. New York has some of the most arcane voter laws in the country. There's no early voting. Our primary dates are all over the map. We don't allow same-day voter registration, and our voting machines are ancient. If voter participation is a hallmark of our democracy, what will you commit to taking to fix these issues instead of protecting the status quo? And that question is from Lauren from Harrison. Jumaane.
I think we have the worst, no, maybe 49th, I believe, in terms of voter turnout, or 48th in terms of voter turnout in the entire country. The voting laws that we have in this state are an incumbency protection program. That's all it is. It is there to make sure that incumbents get reelected. I didn't get elected to get reelected. I got elected to do a job. I hope that job gets me reelected. I hope my vision and what I've done gets me someplace else. But I want to do what I have to do to raise the voices of the people. And the things that I've talked about, from stop, question, and frisk to LGBT rights, when I spoke about them, protecting our Muslim brothers and sisters, they were not popular at that time, but I did it anyway. And now everyone wants to jump on what we have been discussing, many of us in the activist field, for such a long time. I assure you, I want to make sure that everyone has the easiest ability to vote, whether that's same-day registration, whether that's weekend on early voting. Those are things that we can do. What often happens in New York State is we follow other people. From marriage equality to raise the age, we follow. We need people who are going to be in there and lead this nation. We can't wait for other people to do the things that we should be doing now. Again, if we did not empower an IDC, we did not empower a Republican Party, these are things that we could have already had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I agree with the councilman partly. How important it is to create easier access to the ballot box. That is why I have supported for a long time, many, many years, early voting. I don't know why in our state that 12 days before the election that we cannot grant the opportunity for people. And I'm focused on women in particular. I know what it's like to be a busy parent. You get up early in the morning, you pack the lunches, you send the kids off to school, you go to your job. In the evening, you have to go to parent meetings, or you have to go to a soccer game, or go visit your parents in the nursing home. And all of a sudden, it's election day, that one magic Tuesday in November or Thursday in September, and the day's gone and you wanted to vote. We should be ahead of the game in this, and I totally agree with this. But also, as the birthplace of the women's rights movement, I believe that women have a special responsibility as we celebrate this year the 100th anniversary, this November, when women were able to cast that right to vote. So I want to see shock and awe this year. I want to see more voter participation. I believe it's starting in places like this. We can do more to break down the barriers. But let me take it further back. I've supported public financing of campaigns since I was a staffer for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan a long time ago, before my kids were born. And what it does is it takes money out of the process. Because yes, we have laws in place, and yes, we can accept contributions, but by God, I'd much rather spend my time not worrying about that and any elected official, and I don't want Congress or any legislative position to be left to only the millionaires. The person who beat me for Congress by 1%, his net worth was $65 million. Now, I had the Koch brothers spending money against me. I had Karl Rove and all sorts of sinister Tea Party PACs, and I couldn't survive that. I want to get that out of our politics. Right now, once and for all, take the money out of it. But we need to do more. We need to do more. Early voting is a start, same-day registration, and we are absolutely committed to these causes. But we can get this done if the people of New York stand with the governor and I and lead the way and let them know that we want to have easier access, because yes, this is the most important thing we're going to do, particularly in this post-Trump era, when we have a moral responsibility to elect Democrats all the way from the top down. Thank you.
Okay. So the next question is on guns, and this question is from Nicole from Hastings. Historically, there have been a bit of an upstate-downstate divide in New York regarding gun reform, yet an overwhelming percent of New Yorkers support common sense gun laws like red flag laws or increasing the waiting period for gun purchases in cases where the background check cannot deliver an answer in 3 days. What steps would you take to gain upstate support for those modest gun reform issues?
I'm well familiar with this because where I come, there are still Stamp Out Safe Act signs that are actually tattered in the wind, but no one will take them down. So there is a difference. But the governor and I were just here 2 weeks ago at White Plains High School, calling on the Republicans to stand with the Assembly and the governor and I to say something as simple as the red flag bill, and I'll take 2 seconds to explain this. So many times after there's been a mass shooting at a high school or grade school, the teachers say, we saw it coming. The signs were there, but we did not have the power to take action. We simply say with this piece of legislation, it's so common sense. If you see something, teacher or administrator, you have the power to have an evaluation by a judge and determine whether that young person has access to guns in the home. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the most basic form of reform where we can prevent mass shootings. And the mass shooters, I guarantee, are shooting Republicans' kids just as much as they're killing Democratic kids. So why can't we get the Republicans to stand with us on that? We will change that in January. But also, with respect to upstate, I believe that there are people who do understand the importance of background checks. This is something, as a county clerk, I was overseeing the background checks. It took almost a year. By the time you do the FBI background check, and the mental health check, and then the police officers go to your neighbor's home and do personal interviews. We have good laws in New York State on background checks, but we want to make sure that they're expanded even more. So the red flag bill, the law to expand the background checks for an even longer time. But lastly, we believe that if someone's been accused of domestic violence, hurting a woman in their household, they should automatically have the guns removed, because right now, of the 500 women killed this past year, 50%, it was done by someone who is a known current or past partner. We can stop that. We can start saving lives. So that's what we can do, talking about carrying that message to upstate New York as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Jumaane.
Thank you. This gun violence work is probably the thing I'm most proud of in New York City. When we dealt with the abuses of stop, question, and frisk, I was told that gun violence was the big issue. They stopped more young black men than actually lived in the city of New York. We said that might be too much, and there's a better way to deal with the gun violence. And we made sure that we overrode a mayoral veto, Bloomberg, and made sure we included sexual orientation and gender identity as protected statuses under the law for bias-based policing. Now, all of the things that were mentioned are particularly important. They are on the supply side of gun violence, and it's important to know the distinction. And I'm happy to support that, and we should. What sometimes is frustrating to me when we have this discussion, we don't talk about the demand side, because all the things that are spoken there do not get to the handgun violence, which is the preponderance of violence that goes on with gun violence. And so we have to make sure that we're speaking of that, because gun violence looks very different than what I see on the news sometimes, and the stories and the funerals I go to. 33,000 people are killed by gun violence every single year. And because of that, I would never get an A rating from the NRA. I would vote against reciprocity for guns permits across this country. I would vote against every arcane thing that the NRA ever does. I believe this country has a demonic obsession with guns that needs to be repudiated at all costs. And at some point, I know it's not now, I'd love to talk about what we did with gun violence in New York City. The money that I insisted get invested to community groups started with a pilot program of $5 million, well, up to $30 million. Not enough, because the police department has $5 billion. The number one thing that deals with gun violence for young people is a job. So we increased summer youth jobs from 25,000 to 75,000. Gun violence is down in New York City because of the work that I helped shepherd. Unfortunately, it's up in the rest of the state. Suffolk County has one of the highest gun violence rates in the country. And so my hope is that as Lieutenant Governor, we can bring some of the ideas that worked so well in New York City and combine it with some of the ideas that are being done in other places that I visited, Buffalo, Rochester, and really arrest this problem. of course, legislatively, but that's not the entire answer. We have to have a full conversation about gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're down to 2 questions. This is going by so fast. Okay, so the next question, you'll be first, Jumaane, is on immigration, and it's from Mary from Croton. Do you support driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants living and working in New York State?
I'm a son of immigrants. I'm a first-generation American. I have always supported getting driver's license for immigrants, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Latino. That was something I knew that was about the safety of our community. When immigrants, undocumented or not, have driver's license, actually insurances go down, accidents go down. And so it's appalling that some people would have not always supported this. It's appalling that people would have turned over people who applied for this to ICE. I got arrested, and I'm going on trial on Monday for blocking an illegal deportation that was happening, myself and 17 other people. We're so glad that Robbie Ragdale is still here because of our actions. When I do that, it's because I'm standing for undocumented immigrants. I'm standing for all people whose voices can't be heard. I believe the office of Lieutenant Governor cannot just be about passing laws. It's about using your voice, putting your body on the line as an activist when it is necessary. It is critically important. If we had done so many of the things before, if we had supported getting undocumented immigrants driver's license, then Pablo the pizza man may have had a driver's license and not got detained. Then the grandparents who tried to visit their family would not have been detained. We need leadership. Takes risk, takes courage, it takes vision. Unfortunately, from my vantage point, the governor hasn't done any of those. I've seen fellowship at best. And I don't think the office of Lieutenant Governor is to follow the fellowship of the follower. It is to provide real leadership. As again, the reason I am running in the primary, because all the things that are being talked about now, we had an opportunity to do. The leadership that got us to this point, I don't think should be rewarded. We have to make sure there's a balance and leadership there that is going to move us forward. Not hashtag activists, but real activists. And so I absolutely 100% support driver's license. Not so much so, in the city council, we couldn't provide driver's licenses, but we provided municipal IDs. Wherever I am, I do all that I can in my power to support those whose voices are not being heard enough.
Thank you.
"30 years ago, I helped draft legislation as part of the last major immigration reform act we've had in this country. And it gave actual citizenship to millions of people in this country at the time. And included with that would have been a driver's license, all the privileges of citizenship. We continue to need comprehensive immigration reform because in Washington our laws are broken. Yes, I support driver's licenses. The governor and I have supported that. It needs to pass the Assembly and the Senate as soon as possible because I understand that. But I would also say it is an unfair characterization to say that we have not stood up to Donald Trump and his policies that are ripping apart families before our very eyes. In fact, there are children going to bed tonight here in Westchester County without a hug from their mom or dad because we have a cruel individual in our White House who doesn't give a damn. And I'm sick and tired of living in a country like this, and that is why we have led. We have led in challenging legally and through every means possible to stop Donald Trump in his tracks and say, free these children, reunite them with their parents, because God, my God, we have a moral obligations as citizens, as human beings, to do just that. The governor has made sure that we have programs in place to help these children, because I'm going to tell you right now, this separation is going to cause long-term effects. We're dealing with the immediate issues of challenging Donald Trump. And you mentioned ICE. ICE is out of control under Donald Trump. We need to fix it and make sure it performs the proper function and not one where its goal is to rip apart families and cause chaos and distraction from his real goal of just simply building that wall. And that is my position. It has been long-standing on making sure that we have comprehensive reform of our immigration laws and let the people stay here, let them live with the full rights of citizenship. It is long overdue.
So the final question, Lieutenant Governor, you'll be first, is Democratic unity. If you win the primary, how would you unify and motivate the state Democratic Party?
I think it'll be very simple. It'll be very simple. Because I believe as I look out in this room and even compare myself to the council member here, we have so much more that joins us than divides us. We have good democratic hearts. We live those values every single day. So when the primary is all said and done, we'll be laser focused on wiping out the influence of Republicans in our state in November. That's all we need to say. Indivisible Westchester and indivisible throughout the state of New York can help us lead that charge. Getting more people to show up to vote, let them know the consequences, how important it is that we have Andrea Stewart Cousins, Westchester's favorite daughter, as the leader in our state Senate. But also, I know there's races in upstate New York and not far from here, Hudson Valley, where if we mobilize, we harness the energy that is out there, and I can feel it in the streets, against the Republicans, we can take back Congress. We can have finally some checks on the madman in the White House. We can do that by electing Democrats this November. And I'm asking for your help. I'm asking for your help because this is so important. We can only keep Donald Trump under control if we elect Democrats from New York State. We have to do it. We have had so many opportunities. We failed in the past because people didn't show up and they didn't care. That world is over. This is a whole new ball game where people understand that Governor Cuomo and I will do everything in our power to thwart Donald Trump, but my God, it'd be so much easier if we had a Democratic Congress to keep him in check until the final days of his administration are finally come and gone, and we look back at this time as a blip in our history, a very dark and negative time, but we will come back. We will be joined together with democratic values to fight for continuing the minimum wage increases and paid family leave and making sure everyone has a quality education and sensible gun laws and fair immigration. We've done that before. We have led on that. Those are issues where we've taken the charge and the rest of the nation is watching us, and we take that responsibility very seriously. We've done it before. We're going to do it for the next 4 years as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to be clear that I want to abolish ICE. ICE needs to be abolished. There should be no distinction between the rights as humanity, as a citizen, or an undocumented immigrant. I want to make sure I'm very clear about that. I also want to be careful sometimes when we're talking about democratic unity, when more established Democrats are saying that they usually are telling the activists to please be quiet. And I just want to make sure that I reject that. Because the activists are the ones that made all of these things possible. We're the ones that forced people to talk about marijuana legalization. If you talk about $15 minimum wage, I remember when the governor wouldn't even touch it. I was leading a boycott on the first day in Wendy's, and you can Google that. That is the energy that has pushed up, and I think it's time that that energy gets a position of power to do even more. I will say that there is no Democrat running that's worse than a Republican. So that's easy to say. After the primary, we have to focus on the Republicans. But we can't skip over the primary, because I said any blue just won't do. And it's critically important because on January 12th, when the Orange Man was getting inaugurated, I put out a call for elected officials to participate in civil disobedience with me at 12 noon when he was getting inaugurated. What came back to me was, no, we have to wait and see what he's going to do. The governor talked about how it might be nice to have a president from New York. These are the responses that I get back. The governor would not even mention Trump by name for a good 6-7 months. I got arrested on 12 noon with my mother at my side, who's an immigrant, fighting as hard as we can from the beginning, not waiting because we knew what the evil this man was going to do. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, every Democrat is fighting, trying to push back on the Supreme Court that is pushed forward. My point is, we cannot wait for people, we cannot count on people who wait and test the winds to see which way they're blowing. We cannot wait on people who make calculations based on what is politically popular at that time. We need activist elected officials who are going to challenge, who are going to push. That is the only way we have ever moved forward in this country, and it's the only way we're going to survive right now.
Thank you. So I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Hochul and Jumaane Williams for joining us tonight. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's it. I'm sorry. Do you want to say a quick 1 minute?
Sure, I thought it was a closing statement.
We can both. Okay, well, you're going to 1 minute each, and then we're going to take a 10-minute break and come back with gubernatorial candidate Cynthia Nixon.
Thank you so
1
much
minute.
for allowing me the opportunity. I think it's critically important. I always try to say, I don't want anyone to vote. Identity politics is critically important. It is critically important for everyone to see themselves in leadership, black, white, brown, Muslim, Jew, female, transgender, LGBT. But that's the gravy. So I don't want anyone to vote for me because I'm a black man. I also don't want to lose those votes, so I receive that. But I want people to vote for me because of the meal that I'm presenting, the vision of balance and accountability I'm providing for this office, the hard things that I've done in the past 9 years. An example, I didn't work on bills. I led, as a prime sponsor, 49 bills, from LGBT rights to women's reproductive rights, to policing, to gun violence, to housing. All the issues that people told me I should not touch because it would jeopardize my political career, I said I have to touch them because that's what I came for. So I want people to vote for me because of the vision and my history, and also because I'm a black man, because I am a son of immigrants, because I have Tourette's syndrome, because my mom raised 2 knucklehead children by herself. Those identities are important, they are under attack, but if that's all that you have, then it's not a full meal. Thank you so much, and I look forward to more conversation, and I'd love to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you again to all of you for coming out this evening. And again, I think you understand why in this particular era, someone who's been battle-tested and has the scars to show for it is the person you need to continue partnering with our governor to lead our state to even greater heights. And yes, I have a voice, and I've used my voice for decades. But ask the Republicans, I also have fists, and I'm not afraid of a good fight. And yes, I may look like a short woman, and if we're gonna get into the whole identity politics, yes, I'm a woman. And I've had experiences, life's experiences. And so issues like reproductive health are not just buzzwords or changes to make at this particular time in one's career. These are heartfelt feelings I have that I don't want a single man, a boyfriend, a husband, or a stranger telling me what to do with my body or my daughter's body. So that's what this is about. That's what this fight is about. It's way beyond what we're doing at New York State. This is for the soul of our nation because we are the leaders. The choice movement started here in 1970, 3 years before Roe v. Wade. You should be proud of that. The marriage equality was 3 years ahead of the rest of the nation. That was our state under Governor Cuomo. We have the toughest gun laws in America under Governor Cuomo. We have done that together. So please, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of sound bites you're going to hear. But look at the record. Look at the accomplishment. Look what we set out to do and what we've done. And I could not be prouder, and I'm humbled to be your lieutenant governor now and for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you.